Hello, this is Professor Singhal. This is the Java file processing video 4 of 5. Please do not watch this video unless you have watched 1, 2 and 3 and read the loops chapter number 4 from my ebook. If you try to watch it without that, you may get lost. What we are going to do in this video, show you how to read one record of data from an input file and do something useful with it. In first 3 videos we just read the input file or wrote to output file just some random text. We didn't do anything with the data that we read. This time we are going to do some software engineering processing with the data, and I would like to show you first how a record of a data looks like, what can we do with it. Typically, let's say I have student scores for a semester, and I might record them into a text file like this. This is the name of the student, first and last name, and then let's say if student took 3 tests, each test being out of 100, then their scores are right here, 87, 76, 90. Last piece of data is the impossible value for the test score, and that is called a sentinel value. So I'm showing 4 records in the file, but you could have 100,000, 10,000, 100,000, doesn't really matter. Once we wrote the program, it can process all of them. Notice student could have taken different number of tests. Here this person took only 3 tests, this person have taken 4 tests, so we are allowing that kind of flexibility as well. This person philosophy took no test. If there's a single negative score, that means person took no test. In that case, we don't want to compute their grade, and we just want to say you took no test. So processing this file with multiple records, many records, will require a nested loop, which we will not do in this video. I'm only going to take one record and process that first. And in the last video, I will show you how easy it is to convert one record program into multi-record program. So in this video, we are going to process either a file that looks like that, has record of 1 person, or we'll process record of 1 person which looks like that who took no test. So those are our choices in this case. And once we have understood this program, we can process file that has multiple records. Multiple records can be kept in an Excel file, and you can save that as a tab separated value file, and that can also be processed using a Java program. Okay, so first of all, in this case we'll just directly go to our Eclipse, and all the lines I have written from up to line 26 is simply creating code that I can get an input file from the user and also name of an output file, and we have already done this in first 3 videos, so please watch those if some of those are not clear. Okay, so in order to process file that has a useful record, we need to look at the structure of the record. So this is one of the structure of one of the record that I'm going to process. Second one is this one. So notice in each case I have a first name and I have a last name. So obviously I'm going to need 2 variables to read those 2. So I declare those here, string first. Always good idea to initialize that to something. And then since there is a last name, here is Sweet, here is Sophie, I'm going to need a variable for the last name, the string last. I always initialize strings to 0 length string, pair of double quotes right next to each other with no space in between. It's a good idea to do that. Now of course later on I'm going to need first and last combined together, so I'm just going to say string full name. and I'm going to combine first and last with this space in between to a full name. So I got the record. Now I can read first name and last name using my fread object that I created here, not a problem. But then I need a loop of some kind to read the scores, and of course this is the sentinel value, so I can use a sentinel control loop for that. But even before that, I know that some of the records have no scores at all. The first value is the sentinel value itself. So I can read the first score, and if that is positive, then I need to sum them up and get how many there are, get an average, and then assign a grade based on that. But if first score is negative, that means they took no test. I cannot do anything with that. So first thing I need to do is read the first score, read first score, and then see whether it's negative or positive. So reading is pretty easy. I define a variable called int score, and I use my fread object using the next int to read that. So if I read this file, actually before that I should read okay, I made a little mistake here. I should read the first and last name because those are the two first set of data. So I should read first and last name. Yeah, that has to be done before I read the score. I jumped ahead of myself. So first will be fread.next, and we use the next method because there is a space in between toots and sweet. So when line 37 is executed, it's going to just read the word toots, and then I read the last name, last equal to fread.next. So now I have read, if I'm working with this record, I have read this one and this one by the time I'm at line 38. If I'm reading this record, I've read this one and this one by the time I'm on line 38. Okay? And since I got the first and last name, I can combine them into one. I can say full name equals first, leave a space in between, plus last. And I have basis of now printing the first and last name, full name together. So by the time line 38 is executed, I have read this one, and in this case this one and that one. So any read after that will give me a score or a negative number. So on line 41, then I read the first score, which could be either a real score or a sentinel value, and then I decide what it is. So if I say if the score is greater than or 0, that means if it's positive, then I have some processing to do, process the record. Otherwise, give message that there were no scores in the file. Okay? And this is a minor task, but this has to be done. So here, first I print to the console person's name, you have no test scores in the file. And in this case, as I mentioned, we are printing to an output file as well. So So I can use the object PS to print to the output file, and in order to do that I just copy and paste this piece of code here and just replace system.out with PS. Okay, and of course I need the semicolon here. So we handled already the case where there are no scores in the file, and I would like to do one more thing. Just kind of put a separator for each case, and this is my separator. Yeah, it works out kind of nice. And same thing I do with the file as well, to separate records from each other. And then I also put PS here. PS is the print stream object that prints to the file that we created earlier. Okay, so we took care of a case where only sentinel value is there. That means the student took no test. Now we want to process the case where the student actually took the test, and the way to process that would be that we read these scores, sum them up, count how many there are, exit the summing loop as soon as we read the sentinel value. So score is already greater than 0, we know that. So we create a while loop here. Actually, before that we want to print the scores also. So we do the console and the file, and this time I just want to do print because I want to print all the scores in one line. So I say your scores are, and leave a little bit of a gap, and since they have scores we print them, and then I say I do same thing with the file, PS your scores are. Okay. Okay, so now we want to do a sentinel control loop. Sentinel control because this is positive, this is positive. The loop should read all these, sum them up, and when it reads this one it should stop. So we're going to need a couple of variables here in order to process that record. So we're going to need a variable called sum. Set that to 0. Sums up all the scores for the student. Does not sum up the negative value, only the positive value. Count is counts all the tests taken by the student. So for example, if we are reading Tooth Suite, it will count 1, 2, 3. So count will be 3 in that case. Sum will be sum of 87, 76 and 90, which comes to actually 253. So sum will be that. And then we're going to need an average or something, so we can do that a little bit later. So for now this is good enough. So now we write a sentinel control loop, which is while the score is greater than or equal to 0. Because understand, the student could have a 0 score, so we cannot make it already greater than 0. Actually, as a matter of fact, I should do that here also. Yeah, this I should do that here as well. Because student could have a 0 score, and 0 score will be a valid score. So this is the loop we want to write. So in the loop, since I already read one score here, let's see, yeah, that's fine, I'm reading only one record, so I can sum them up. So I say sum equal to sum plus score. So I got the sum now. Now since I got one score, I got to count it. So increase the counter by 1. And since this is a sentinel control loop, I gotta read inside the loop again to read the next score. Alright, so let's code walk through this loop for this record. For the sake of convenience, I'm going to bring this record down here. So let's put this record down here. Okay. So on the line 41, I read the first score. On line 41, I read 87. 87 is greater than or equal to 0, so this is true. So we're going to execute this if block up to here. And I forgot one more thing, by the way. I should print that. I'm going to explain this again. Let me print that since I'm printing the scores. Score plus, and gives me a little bit of a space between the scores, and print the same thing to the file. There you go. So this will print the scores to the console as well as to the file. One reason I'm printing the console and file both, this helps in debugging quite a bit. If I print everything that I'm going to print to the file also to the console, that allows me to debug my program faster. Okay, that's the reason of doing that. Okay, so let's analyze this one record and how we're going through code walkthrough up to this point. Okay, so on line 37, I read first fread.next, so that's going to read toots. Okay, line 38, I'm doing fread.next. It's going to store into last the word sweet. On line 41, I'm reading the score fread.next int. That's going to read 87, so store 87 into the score. Then we come to line 43. Since 87 is greater than or equal to 0, since that is true, I enter this if structure here, and I initialize these two variables. Then this word is printed to the console as well as to the file, and since 87 is greater than or equal to 0, I enter the loop here, and I print the current value 87 to the console and to the file. And notice my sum, originally was 0, so 0 plus 87. So in first iteration, let's keep track of that somewhere else. So in first iteration, actually I'm just going to write here. First iteration, sum is 87. Okay, and then count was 0. So in the first iteration, count equal to 1. Okay, and then on line 55, fread reads the next score, which is 76. Okay, since 76 is greater than or equal to 0, true, to the console is going to print 76, to the file is going to print 76. Earlier value of sum was 87. Now I add plus 76 to it. So in the second iteration, sum becomes 86 plus 70, 87 plus 76, and then count increases to 2, so count becomes 2. That is second iteration. And then I read score again. This time I'm going to read 90. The 90 greater than or equal to 0 is still true. So I print the 90 to the console and to the file, and then sum becomes current value of sum, which was 87 plus 76, but then we add 90 to it, plus 90. So that's my third iteration. This becomes 253. You will see that in a minute when we print the results. And in the third iteration, my count upgrades to 3. And then on line 55, again read the next score, which is a sentinel value -1. Since -1 greater than or equal to 0 is false, I will exit the loop. Okay? So outside the loop, in order to print my scores properly, I just do a line break essentially, and same thing here for the file, line break. So at this point, let's see, that should have worked. Okay, let me try that. Something's not right with that. All of a sudden this is not working. There's no out, sorry about that. That's println, ps.println, that's fine. Out is part of something else. Okay, sorry for the confusion. Okay, alright, so now I have a value of students' scores, sum of students' score, which is 253 for Touch Suite, and how many there are. So obviously I can easily find the average. So average should be a double type. We don't want to throw anything that is fractional. And the only way to do that would be, there are two different ways. I can cast two double type, the sum divided by count. That gives me the average. That's one way, or you can just multiply sum by 1.0, and that's another method to do that. The second thing I want to do is I want to find a rounded average. A rounded average I want to find as an integer, so integer rounded AV. And one good way to do that would be cast to int math.round and pass to it the average. Okay, so by the time we do line 61, we have these pieces of information about the student. We have their name. Okay, we printed all their scores already. We have some of their scores. We have how many tests they took, count of number of tests they took. We have real average, and we have the rounded average. And I should have done one more thing. I should have printed student's name right here. So let me just do that again. I mean, not again, but first time. Hello. Full name. And so now we are separating each student's record by their name, and do the same thing into the file and just change that to PS. Should do one more thing for each record. Besides, I'm going to need that later anyway. Just give it line separator. So just like I did in earlier. And change that to PS. And while I'm at it, I'm just going to do that here also somewhere. When you have multiple records, putting these separators is very useful. Right now we just have one record, so it may not seem that important. Okay, so by the time I computed up to line 65, I've already printed a student's name and their scores, their raw scores, but I do have information on their overall score in all the tests and how many tests they took, the real average of their test and the rounded average of their test. So I can print now those pieces of information here. So print information gathered or processed so far. So these are the pieces of information we print. You took how many tests? Count 3 count tests. So if they took 3 tests, it will say you took 3 tests. And as we are doing it again and again, we'll print that to file as well. Then we print for them sum of all their scores, sum of all your scores equals, that is simply sum, and print that to file as well. And now we also know the real average and the rounded average. So the real average of all your tests equals, so real average is going to contain some fractions, and print that to file as well. PS. But we want to give them the rounded average also. The rounded average of all your tests equals rounded average, and we print to that file, print that to the file as well. Notice this program is quite different. We are printing the raw data are their like first and last name, etc., and their scores, but also we are printing the processed data. Processed data is like number of tests they took, sum of all their tests, their average, real average, their rounded average. Okay? That's called data processing, so we are doing that. Finally, we want to compute their grade based on the rounded average, and we just use standard if and else for that. So if rounded average is greater than or equal to 90, we set a variable called grade to A. So I need to define a variable for that here and set grade equal to A. So A is a character, so I use single apostrophe, and now I do the same thing for the grade C, D, B, C, D, and F. So I say else if rounded average is greater than 80, then I set the grade to B, and I do the same thing for the C and D. If it's greater than 70, set this to C. If it's greater than 60, set this to D. and last one is just else only. There's no need for else if in the last one. So else, delete all that. Grade is F. So by the time we finish line 1, we have their grade also, so we just print that as well. Your grade is, print that here, and print that to output file as well. Okay, by now our program is finished. We have to do a few more things, but it's more or less finished. Let's kind of look at the different portions of the program. I'm going to highlight them and tell what each portion is doing. Starting from this line all the way up to line 26, we are handling all the logistics of getting the input file name, binding that to a file object, binding that to a scanner object, getting output file name, binding that to a file object, and binding that file object to a print stream object, so that we can read an input file and write to an output file. Then we look at the structure of the file, and based on that we define a bunch of variables. We read the first name, last name, concatenate into a full name. Then we read the first score. First score could be a positive number, could be a negative number. Negative is the sentinel value. If it's positive number greater than or equal to 0, we process that record, and all the way up to here is our record processing. Okay? But if it was negative, which is the sentinel value, we give them a message that you have no scores in the file. Okay? So what processing do we need to do in student score is as follows. We read the first score, and of course if it's greater than 0, then we do the processing. We define a bunch of variables, sum to sum up all their scores, count to count how many there are. If score is greater than 0, then we print the score, add that to a sum variable, increase the counter by 1 each time, and this loop will exit when the sentinel value is read. By then all the scores will be summed up into one sum, and we will be able to count how many there are. Then we find the average, which is sum divided by count cast into double. We find a rounded average, which is pass the average to math.round, convert that into an int. We print all the data that we have so far, which is sum, number of tests, real average and rounded average. Then we compute the grade based on the rounded average, assign A, B, C, D or F, and then finally we print their grade. And the last part left to do in this program is, first, just on the console only, say end of program. But an extremely important part of the whole thing is close the files. fre.close and then ps.close. If you forget to close output file, you will see nothing in your file. It's very important to close it. You will see no data in it, and you will see what happened to your program. It's extremely important to close it. You will not see anything in your file if you don't close it. Okay, now I'm going to show process this program with two sets of data. One file has this data, another file has that, and I'm going to do them one at a time and show you how the program works. So let's run it. So it's asking me the file name, and I'm going to use this file, onerecord.txt, and as usual there is absolutely no reason to make errors. What I will do, I will just In fact, let me open another piece of software here. I'll just copy and paste the input file name and output file name right there. So one record txt, and so this is my input file name, so I just copy the whole thing and paste that here. And now it's asking me the output file name, so I repeat the same procedure. This file is empty right now. This is where I want the output data to be created. So I take this text, and over here I also paste the name of this other file, output file, onerecord.txt. So I give that, and there we go. Hello to Sweet, your scores are 87, 76 and 90. You took 3 tests. Some of your scores is 253. Real average is 84.333. Rounded average 84. Your grade is B. End of the program. If I open this one here, I'll see the same thing. See, hello to Sweet, your scores are 87, 76 and 90. You took 3 tests. Some of your all your scores is 253. Real average is 84.33. Rounded average of all your tests is 84. Your grade is B. Okay. Now I think I wanted to get all the scores on one line, so I didn't do that. I can fix that actually. Let's see how I can fix that. It's not that hard to do. I had a println somewhere where I should have had print. There you go, and that will fix that problem. We'll get all the scores in one line. Okay. Alright, now I want to process the second record, one record version 2. Actually, that's the output file for that, where I had just one student and they only had a sentinel value, which means they took no tests. So this will be my input file. So I go here and change that here, and also out one record version 2, take that one and copy and paste that here, and this time I'm going to process this record. So I just want to copy this file and run my program again. And when you process multiple records, you would not have to run it twice the way I'm doing it here. So that's my input file, asking me for the output file. This is my output file here. And this time, very simple output. Philosophy, you have no test scores in the file, because this entire group of statements here are skipped because their score was negative. So nothing up to here is done for that record because they have only a negative score. So only this one is printed for them. We can go to the file, and out one record version 2 says philosophy, you have no test scores in the file. So that got printed here. Okay. Our next video would be where we'll have many records. We are going to process this file, and really that is a very simple matter of putting a portion of this program into a outer loop, which is end of file control loop. It will just say has next basically, and you will see how easy it is to convert a program that has capability of processing one record into a program that has capability of processing multiple records. Okay, thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.